It took a year, but it finally happened. The most powerful man in music finally addressed AI. Nearly a year ago, in April to be specific, a song began surfacing all over TikTok, then spreading to social media by a creator named Ghostwriter977. The song was titled Heart on My Sleeve and used the AI voice of Drake and The Weeknd. People loved it, and it began to spread, going viral, until it was taken down from all public platforms. AI had been brewing, but this was the first time someone took it to such a level that the music industry was forced to respond, and they had the following to say. UMG's success has been, in part, due to embracing new technology and putting it to work for our artists, as we've been doing with our own innovation around AI for some time already. With that said, however, the training of generative AI using our artists' music, which represents both a breach of our agreements and a violation of copyright law, as well as the availability of infringing content created with generative AI on DSPs, begs the question as to which side of history all stakeholders in the music ecosystem want to be on. The side of artists, fans, and human creative expression, or on the side of deepfakes, fraud, and denying artists their due compensation. These instances demonstrate why platforms have a fundamental legal and ethical responsibility to prevent the use of their services in ways that harm artists. We're encouraged by the engagement of our platform partners on these issues as they recognize they need to be part of the solution. This statement sounds a lot different knowing that TikTok and UMG were going through negotiations throughout this year and what was the outcome of that. But stay tuned, we're going to get into that later. Since then, things had been quiet and no AI song has ballooned into that virality. But that doesn't mean the music industry wasn't exploring AI. Like they said, they were. And in a new interview, Lucian Grange, chairman and CEO of Universal Music, which owns about a third of all recorded music in market share, including Drake and The Weeknd, who were used for that original viral song and their voice, has decided to come out of the shadows and publicly speak in an interview where he shined a lot of light on his apprehensions about AI, the technology, as well as what he plans to do with it. The original statement that they made in response to the Ghostwriter song going viral was meant to make them look like they cared about the artist, the human expression, and going against deepfakes, drawing a clear line in the sand, but his actions have been anything but. Likely once he realized there was no escaping this, and putting your head in the sand was only going to leave them behind others who chose to adopt this technology. I've always been able to smell intuitively what the next scene is, he said. Whether it's punk or new romantics, I've always enjoyed it, picked up on it, and this is my view of technology. Generative AI, which can produce novel images, text, and music, smelled to him like the next big scene. That's all I am, a talent scout. Grange invited me to imagine an illegitimate version of a Kanye West song featuring Taylor Swift's voice. Get your head around that, and then it's ingested into one of the platforms and someone starts monetizing it. I haven't spent 45 years in the industry just to have it be a free-for-all where anything goes. Not going to happen while I'm still here. At the same time, he didn't want to miss out, in case AI-generated material became a new source of revenue for artists and their labels. The reason for a lot of record labels fighting against new technology, be it Napster or Spotify even at one point, TikTok, which now had the outcome of them removing their music entirely, which I did a video on the history of that, you should check that out. And now AI is because they just see it as losing them money, infringing on their copyright, etc. Which to a degree is understandable, but this has nothing to do with artistic expression like they try to make it seem. I haven't spent 45 years in the industry just to have it be a free-for-all where anything goes. Doesn't a free-for-all sound great for artists? This is what a lot of this is about. Keeping control, and all of these platforms at first somewhat decentralized the control that record companies had over distribution of music for many years, mainly radio stations, and the funds and connections to mass distribute CDs to record stores and big stores like Best Buy, Target back in the day. It's why we see platforms like Spotify, which at one point had this golden age of independent artists blowing up on there, from great music being plastered everywhere, to now, where it might as well just be another radio station with how many mainstream signed artists are everywhere, and the independent artists are relegated to tiny editorial playlists if they're lucky enough to get that. But that's what happens when Spotify needs the catalogs of these record companies and agrees to a reduced licensing rate for shares in their company. Now these labels own shares in Spotify and get to dictate where things should move, and independent artists are definitely not benefiting record companies, so the intention isn't moving forward with them. He experiments early, Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, told me. So then the cost isn't as huge later, because you're not betting the farm on everything you're trying to do. He's always wanted to enable technologies, Bronfman said. He doesn't want to shut them down. but he doesn't want to give them entirely free rein until he has a better understanding of their potential, either to grow or harm the industry. It sounds like technology just moved ahead of him in this case, and cases in the past, unanticipated, and in order to compete, he chose to shut it down for the moment, taking your ball off the court, legally, so he could catch up. Lucian would go on to say that this oversupply of AI songs or saturation is, quote, getting in the way of real talent and real songwriters, which is interesting because there are thousands of new tracks daily that are what is described as, quote, functional music, which is pretty much background music, be it for sleeping, exercising, studying, and the like. Endel, a company that creates music like this, said that there are about 15 billion streams of these types of tracks a month. 15 billion. No songwriter, no producer, none of that other stuff. And ironically enough, well, usually there is some sort of a producer. Despite claiming that this stuff was getting in the way of real talent, just a month after their takedown of Ghostwriter, UMG announced their partnership with Endel that would allow UMG artists to use AI to make functional versions of their songs. Michael Nash, UMG's executive vice president, chief digital officer, said, "At UMG, we believe in the incredible potential of ethical AI as a tool to support and enhance the creativity of our artists, labels, and songwriters, something that Endel has harnessed with impressive ingenuity and scientific innovation. We are excited to work together and utilize their patented AI technology to create new music soundscapes anchored in our artist-centric philosophy that are designed to enhance audience wellness, powered by AI that respects artists' rights in its development." Quite confusing if you consider the line in the sand they drew just a month prior, but billions of streams a month are nothing to scoff at, for something that seems like it takes minimal work and minimal expense. In fact, UMG went headfirst into exploring AI. They created something called an artist incubator, where songwriters, producers, and the like would mess around with the tech and give Google feedback. They created this in tandem in a partnership with Google. One of these participants was actually Yo Gotti, and another was Don Was, the head of Blue Note, UMG's storied jazz label, and musician who was stunned with how the AI performed. Don Was told me about his session with Lyria. He prompted the model with the name of a famous artist, a legendary singer-songwriter he had worked with in the past, asking for a song about his first car. The DeepMind team suggested adding the command produced by Don Was. The AI generated 4 different fragments of songs about cars, all with lyrics, melodies, and orchestration, and sung in the AI-generated voice of the artist, which had been learned from YouTube videos. Was described the experience as a combination of awe and terror simultaneously. His first thought was, "This is better than anything I could have done." His second was, "I could collaborate with myself on my very best day." For that reason, he told himself, "The songwriters are going to like this more than anybody, as long as you can't steal from them." He imagines an AI that has been trained on an artist's complete works, and which other songwriters could collaborate with, for a fee. The songwriter he mused gets paid, and he can put his name on the song if he likes it, take it off if he doesn't. This was a 6-time Grammy Award-winning artist and producer that's saying this, not some corporate suit or someone with little to no experience making music that is shocked by how effective something like this is. But the interesting conversation that was born out of this always comes back to money, understandably so, but it is, who owns the copyright? The Swedish musician Bjorn Ulvaeus, who was also a part of the cohort, said, "I have to accept that the prompter gets a copyright. It sounds radical, but I see no other way." He likened it to when he first listened to the Beatles and learned how to make music from that as an inspiration. We kind of trained on that, and when we started writing all those references, we used them for inspiration. Every songwriter in the world would subscribe to that service if it was good enough. The AI models would have a heap of money like Spotify does, and that money could be distributed back to songwriters and labels according to consumption. There are 2 camps, those that claim the same way he and every other artist built their musical prowess on inspiration from listening or training on those artists that came before them. AI is doing the same, except it is doing that with far more bandwidth than a human can. The other camp says that it is illegal because the music that he was trained on was licensed or bought by those people in the past, whereas the claim is that AI models have been trained without licensing or purchasing the music. Lucian had his own nuanced way of looking at it. When I asked Grange whether licensing the music used for training AIs was the way forward, he offered an automobile analogy. If only it were as simple as buying a car. This is what the manufacturing cost is. This is what the taxes are, he said. This is more like building a car, so it's far too early for me to discuss business models. But it's in my bones to try and be ahead. UMG has lobbied Congress for a federal right of publicity and a recent bipartisan bill, the No AI Fraud Act, aims to protect artists' voices under federal intellectual property law. I personally think legislation is critical, Grange told me. He sees the unlicensed use of AI-generated voices and styles as a form of identity theft. It's, quote, immoral, he said. It seems like Universal's not happy in taking it as theft because last October, Universal Music Publishing Group sued the AI company Anthropic, the creator of Claude, for systematic and widespread infringement of copyrighted material in the training of Claude and in its potential output. Both sides submitted written responses to the US Copyright Office on several topics, including fair use and copyright. Keep in mind, Claude is really not just focused on music. Hell, it's not even music related at all. It's pretty much like a language learning model. It's kind of like GPT-4, not meant for music. So Anthropic claimed that its AI is the composition of so many different works to build a model of the way language functions, and that lyrics comprise a very small amount of that. UMG argued in its submission to the Copyright Office that, quote, the wholesale appropriation of UMG's enormous catalog of copyright-protected sound recordings and musical compositions to build multi-billion commercial enterprises is simply theft on an unprecedented scale. Jonathan King, who's the copyright lawyer who worked on this, said, one of the principles of fair use is that authors ought to be allowed to build upon the work of other authors in some circumstances. But that's not how AI works. AI uses copyrighted materials to emulate human authorship. The machine is not an author, in the traditional sense of a creative and expressive human being, because it is just synthesizing an imitation of human content, derived from algorithms that study and try to sound like human authors. While this was going on, Grange wasn't keen on leaving it up to the courts, with how long that would take, saying, if we had waited for the tech companies to finish innovating, we would have ended up as roadkill, in reference to companies like LimeWire, Napster, and other file sharing sites. It's no surprise that UMG gave that statement because it's the same one they gave in their argument in the midst of negotiating a new licensing deal with TikTok, which fell through, leading to all of UMG artists' music being pulled from the social platform. UMG felt that they helped build TikTok and weren't properly compensated for it. But in the same vein, don't content creators help build TikTok as well with their original content? Should they deserve deals as well? I don't think this holds up to TikTok as much as it does the AI learning because music is just one component of it. Literature is another. Peer-reviewed journals another. Speeches, scripts for films and television series. Nearly every other medium in which these AI models are trained have an equal right to be upset and claim that these multi-billion-dollar AI companies were built on their content. And I'd be inclined to agree, but just what justifies it? If they bought all of this work legally, then fed it to the AI, do they really need to pay them? It goes back to the conversation of whether this thing is human or not, it seems like. A human author would never be sued if his writing style was built off inspiration by 5 to 10 different authors. It's a completely different author and writing style at that point. Nor would they lay claim onto any of his earnings. But with this, it's different, which is really a futuristic dystopia we never thought we'd live in, which is the argument hinges on whether this thing is considered human or not. We know it's not, but the way that it learns is designed to mimic that of a human, and the way that it distributes this information back to the user. I think it's smart for Lucian Grange to act fast on this, and whatever is going on behind the scenes is way farther along than we can know or imagine. Because the closest we've seen to music and AI is people who just use it to change their voice to someone famous. The production, engineering, and songwriting is all being done by an actual person in the songs that we've heard. It's only the voice that is different, which is a misconception some people still have. But with the DeepMind test they conducted with Google, this thing was on another level. And this was nearly, 6+ months ago? And is the problem oversaturation with AI songs flooding the algorithms of different sites? Or is it cheapening of the brands that UMG has built with its artists? Each artist is its own brand, carefully curated. And whether people want to admit it or not, if they got a new Drake song every day, regardless of how good it is, they would eventually tire out of Drake, and his songs would lose meaning and that special spark when you get something too much. Same with any other music artist. Now it's different because a label would be earning money on all of this, but AI voice can cheapen the brand without the label getting paid. I still think there's a distinction for the consumer because they categorize it differently. Knowing that the AI song wasn't sanctioned or stamped by Drake, but this could be a reality in the near future. More than this being about the artist, it seems to be about a race to get in control of ownership, be that the songwriting, music that is put out, and most importantly in this case, the voice, for now. But one thing that got me was the terminology the writer gave. I'm never really apprehensive about anything. Grange told me of his exploratory AI ventures. I had raised the question of whether he could really trust Google, since the company's long-term interest may lie in giving its users the tools to close the gap between wannabes and real artists by making it possible for anyone to create a fully orchestrated song by typing in a prompt or even whistling a melody. A tsunami of noise could be coming. What makes a real musician and a wannabe? Because at one point it was the ability to play instruments. That faded with programs coming out that mimics real instruments, and thousands of producers were born, many of which created hits and became successful DJs, producers, and the like, unable to play any instrument. Were they wannabes? Is an executive producer a wannabe for putting all the right people in the room, telling them what he wants to do, and the quote, real musicians executing on that vision, while he makes tweaks so it sounds exactly the way he wants it to as it came across in his mind? Or are those that use autotune wannabe singers? This would just be the progression of technology in music. The cream will always rise to the top. Just like not everybody is a successful producer now, despite it being technologically easier than it was when you had to learn all of these instruments. I don't believe it will be so easy for everyone to be successful when AI can create the exact sounds you need it to without having to go through the learning curve of these programs that currently exist. It'll still take the knowledge of what makes a great song and have to compete against other people using the same tools in front of the same market we currently have. If anything, it might democratize it and leave a lower barrier to entry for talented people that may not have the resources that it takes to currently produce. Not everything can be good and successful, otherwise they wouldn't be good or successful. They would just be.